She woke at dawn before the city stirred. The morning light came through the thin curtains in her small apartment, striping the walls with pale gold. She rose and dressed in her uniform, crisp blue shirt, navy trousers, polished black boots, the badge pinned above her heart. She knew where each wrinkle and fold should lie. The routine was soothing, comforting in a world that often seemed anything but. Her name was Maya Reyes. She was precisely what her job title said, a parking enforcement officer. She walked out into the chilly morning air, her breath visible in small clouds, and headed to her beat. There were blocks upon blocks of meter-lined streets, alleys, curbside zones, parking garages. In a city of endless motion, cars came and went, and someone had to watch them. She slung her enforced parking gear across her shoulder, a handheld ticketing machine, handheld flashlight for low-lit zones, full, without maps, notepad, pen. She nodded to the guard at the municipal lot gate, whose curt nod she returned. She marched out across the city's arteries. At 8 in the morning, the streets were stirring. A delivery truck parked momentarily in a loading zone. A yellow taxi idled as the driver ran across the road to get coffee. She approached, note in hand. "Good morning," she called politely. She scribbled something. The truck driver looked up warily, then shrugged as she placed a warning slip under the windshield wiper. She moved on. Across the street, a car sat half off the curb, bumper jutting outward. Another ticket. This was her world. Hundreds of small infractions, a mosaic of public order. Some people cursed as they passed. Others glanced, indifferent, but she carried on. She was used to being unseen, a background function, like a street light or a curb, but she understood the small dignity her position afforded. She believed that a city's system only works when even the smallest gears turn smoothly. One chilly Tuesday afternoon, she stopped at a bus stop to rest briefly. She perched on the edge of a concrete planter, pulling out a bottle of water, her breath coming faster than usual. She glanced over her notes, meter readings, quotas, zones to revisit. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, a momentary flutter of fatigue. As she sat, she noticed a commotion down the block, smoke curling from between two buildings. People pointed upward. She stood and hurried in that direction. At first glance, the building was an aging brick structure, 3 stories with the top floor's windows dark, smoke seeping from under the roofline. Flames flickered at one corner. A mother and child appeared in an upper window, their silhouettes small and panicked. Maya's heart pounded. She knew she was not a firefighter or a paramedic. She wasn't trained for this, but she was nearby. She dashed forward and began shouting at bystanders, "Stay back, stay back." Some people froze, others wailed. She pulled her radio, though her assignment rarely, if ever, required its use. She barked into it, "Fire in progress, 3rd floor, Elm and 5th. Need fire department now. Possible trapped people upstairs." The dispatcher's voice crackled in reply, "Copy. Fire trucks en route." Maya looked up. The ladder trucks would take time. The mother and child were screaming now. The windows were hot, the flames gaining strength. She scanned the street, a fire hydrant near the corner. She sprinted toward it, wrenched open the cap with her gloved hands, but realized she carried no hose, only her tools. She cursed under her breath. Still, she could do something. She yelled down to the terrified figures, "Cover your faces with cloth. Stay low. When the ladder gets here, stay very still." Her words crackled over the urgency of the moment. Then an idea struck her. She dashed into the nearest building's lobby, flung open the back door, and yelled to a security guard, "Do you have a fire hose in back? Can we use it on that building?" The guard, startled, directed her to a maintenance room. Inside was an old hose, coiled, thick and heavy, long disused, perhaps for a sprinkler system. She dragged it out. Next, she ran to the hydrant with the hose trailing behind. She fumbled the coupling, tightened it, and nearly slipped in her haste. The hydrant sprang, water roared through the hose with force. She gripped it and aimed at the corner of the building, hoping to slow the blaze. The pressure strained her arms. She held steady. Smoke choked her. Her lungs burned. But she held the nozzle and sprayed. Flames hissed and retreated a little. She kept going until she heard sirens, the fire department arriving. Firefighters leapt out, organized, took over. They strode up ladders, rescued the mother and child, extinguished the blaze. The firefighters, startled, greeted her with shock and gratitude. One officer, a chief, took her arm. "You did that. You saved lives before we arrived." She shook her head, trembling. "I just tried." They moved her aside, gave her water, blankets. She sat amid the chaos, soot on her face, heart pounding. Fire trucks and engines blared. Reporters began to arrive, cameras and microphones appearing. People gathered behind barricades. She slipped away quietly as the crowd and cameras focused on the heroic firefighters. She limped back to her parked cart, collected her tools, and resumed her rounds, though shaken. That night she lay awake. The city's lights glowed beyond her window. She thought of the woman and the child, their faces frightened, and realized she had acted. She did not hold a luminous title, but that did not matter. In that moment she had become more than the sum of her job. The next day work resumed, but whispers moved through the municipal building. At first, rumors, a mystery helper who had fought the flames. Then local reporters tracked her down. Someone took a photo, a uniformed parking officer, soot, smudged, waterlogged hose coiled at her feet, standing in front of the smoldering building, face streaked, eyes fierce. That photo went viral on social media overnight. Her supervisor called her in. She feared censure, misuse of authority. But instead, to her surprise, the supervisor said, "They're asking for your name. Are you okay?" She stammered. I didn't expect. I just did what was necessary." Her supervisor nodded. "They're calling you a hero." She laughed, the sound hollow. "I'm just a parking officer." The mayor's office got involved. The mayor, Elena Morno, held a press conference. Cameras lined the podium. Reporters inched forward. The mayor spoke. "Yesterday, our city saw courage in an unlikely place. MS Maya Reyes, a parking enforcement officer, intervened in a dangerous fire, potentially saving lives. She acted swiftly and bravely." There was applause. Reporters shouted questions. The mayor gestured and said, "I'm proud to declare Maya Reyes a hero of our city." That was the moment she became something new in the public mind, a hero. The headlines blared. "Parking officer becomes city's hero." From meter tickets to lifesaver. The officer who battled fire. Her life pivoted. Her everyday rhythms shifted. She became a reluctant celebrity. Interviews, news segments, local talk shows. People came up to her on the street, tearful mothers, aspiring young girls, older folks thanking her. Some brought gifts, flowers, cards, small tokens. She accepted them awkwardly. Meanwhile, municipal officials approached her. There was talk of promoting her, giving her commendations, making a public ceremony. She hesitated. She had always believed in modest work, not grand titles. But over time, she began to see that her small role carried gravity. The ripple effects of her actions were real. Repairs had to be made to the burned building, families helped, fire safety protocols reviewed. The city wanted to ensure such a thing would never happen unprepared again. The mayor visited her on a quiet afternoon in a small office. The mayor smiled. "You've changed how people think about civic duty, Maya. You showed that heroes are not just those in capes or uniforms. You acted because someone needed help." Maya swallowed. "I'm glad nobody died. That was my only goal." The mayor nodded. "You deserve more than thanks. I want to offer you a formal commendation and a position in the Office of Emergency Response, if you'd accept." She looked down. The offer was staggering. She thought of her routines, her familiarity with city streets, her sense of order. Perhaps she could help more now? She nodded. "I'd like that." Weeks turned into months. Maya's life changed. She transitioned from her desk job as parking enforcer to a liaison in emergency services, coordinating response logistics, advising on city grid access, working with fire, police, sanitation, public works. She drew upon her intimate familiarity with every street corner, alleyway, route knowledge gathered from years walking meter lines. She guided fire trucks through narrow alleys, helped optimize hydrant placement, designed emergency parking corridors that never interfered with public access. Still, she never forgot where she came from. Every morning she relaced her boots and put on the uniform, not exactly the old uniform, but new attire bearing symbols of her new role. She walked the same streets, studied maps, spoke to drivers, consulted with construction crews. She remained grounded, rooted in daily city life. The press would ask, "Do you feel like a hero now?" She would smile softly. "I feel like someone with responsibility." She avoided grandiose statements. One evening, a large storm struck. Wind and rain battered the city. Power flickered. Trees fell, flooding in low-lying areas. The Emergency Coordination Center sent teams out. Maya sat in the center, monitoring dozens of simultaneous reports. A block with downed wires, a collapsed retaining wall, a basement filling with water, a mother trapped in a flooded stairwell. She allocated resources, rerouted emergency vehicles, coordinated with utility companies. In one sector, a school bus had taken refuge behind a barricaded intersection, children inside scared. She sent in rescue teams. In another, a homeless shelter's roof was leaking dangerously. She dispatched support units. At the height of the storm, she got a call. A small nursing home on Franklin Avenue had flooding seeping upward. They needed evacuation assistance immediately. The roads were clogged. She navigated through back alleys, stalked by debris. She personally drove in a city SUV, accompanied by paramedics, through narrow routes she knew well. They reached the site, got residents out safely, slew with rising water. When the storm passed, citywide damage assessment began. The mayor appeared on the steps of City Hall, announcing Maya by name. Her leadership helped avert tragedy. She said, "We owe her our gratitude." Again, she squirmed under the label. She was one person doing what she could. But she also understood that stories mattered. When young people saw her a woman of modest beginnings, a public servant acting decisively, they saw a possibility. When citizens realized that behind every meter, every ticket, there was a human who cared for the city's order, maybe they would treat each other better, care more for public spaces. At home, Maya wrestled with fatigue, guilt, exhaustion. Evening dinners with friends became rare. She slept little, but she also found solace in quiet moments. A walk through a narrow lane at dusk, the hum of insects, a stray cat crossing the road, a streetlight humming. She visited neighborhoods she once patrolled, chatting with shopkeepers, hearing their complaints, their hopes. She kept her empathy alive, One day, a crisis erupted unlike any before. A bridge at the city's river crossing had begun to crack. Engineers issued warnings, closure imminent. The traffic from that bridge carried enormous volume ambulances, trucks, public transit. If it failed, a catastrophic collapse could cut lifelines across the city. The mayor's office convened a crisis meeting. Maya was there, invited because of her role and her knowledge of city flow. Engineers gave data, vibration metrics, structural stress, urgent repairs required. But work could take days. Meanwhile, heavy traffic had to be rerouted. That meant altering bus lines, redirecting emergency vehicles, coordinating with police to manage congestion. Maya spoke. I can map alternate routes. I know the side streets, the alleys, the secondary bridges. I'll send real-time alerts to drivers via municipal apps. I'll coordinate signage and signal changes to handle the shift. There were skeptical glances. She was only former parking enforcement, after all, but the mayor vouched for her, and so the operation began. Under Maya's direction, traffic flowed over auxiliary crossings. She oversaw the installation of new signage, real-time traffic updates, emergency corridors reserved for first responders. The city's 311 and transit apps alerted commuters. Ambulances followed alternative routes, delayed but alive. Deliveries reconfigured. Buses adjusted schedules. Engineers worked around the clock. When the repaired bridge reopened, the city held its breath and passed across safely. The crisis was averted. At the reopening ceremony, the mayor again praised Maya. Her vision, her courage, her local knowledge. She turned potential catastrophe into a success. Applause echoed. The crowd chanted her name. Maya stood at the edge of the platform, silent. She saw families in the crowd, children. She saw city officials. She thought back to that first day of fire, how she acted because someone needed help before she ever thought of heroism. She understood that the transformation came not from honors but from action. In time, she launched a program, City Safe Streets Initiative. Under her guidance, the city invested in hydration stations, improved lighting, installing more fire hydrants, upgraded signage, better street maintenance. She held monthly forums where citizens brought ideas or concerns. She visited schools and talked about civic duty, public safety, community care. She didn't ask for applause. On a breezy spring morning, she was walking her old beat now, perhaps a nostalgic ritual, through the same blocks she once patrolled. She passed a food cart vendor who called, Ms. Reyes, thank you again for saving that building. She smiled and waved, stopped for a moment. The vendor handed her a small paper cup of chai. She accepted. They talked about traffic, complaints about parking, potholes. A little girl tugged her mother's hand and whispered, That's her, the hero, right? Maya turned, nodded kindly, and crouched low. Hi, be brave, be kind, she said gently. The girl's mother smiled. It was a small moment, but it reverberated. At noon, she walked into her office, greeted her team, convened a planning meeting for expansion of hydrants on underserved blocks. She listened to junior staff, empowered them, fostered innovation. Despite the acclaim, she maintained humility. She sometimes thought, I'm still that officer giving tickets, just in a different context. She still believed in systems, in the small tasks that kept a city functioning, even the meter lines, and the people saw it. Citizens wrote letters, children mailed drawings, newspapers ran features. She was just a ticket officer, now she runs safety strategy. Community groups partnered with her office, neighborhood watches liaised, fire and police departments integrated more closely. Years later, a memoir was published by an independent author, From the Curb to the Command Center, the Maya Reyes story. She initially declined, then accepted with conditions. The focus must be on collective effort, not glorification. She would not appear on talk shows. Instead, she would direct all proceeds to community safety programs. In the book's epilogue, she wrote, "The title of hero is weighty. I never sought it. I only desired to act, to respond when called. The city is not safe because of one person. It is safe when each neighbor, each hand, each small duty is held with care." Her role evolved over the years. She became advisor for urban safety on the mayor's cabinet. She spearheaded citywide reforms in emergency readiness. She testified before state assemblies about urban infrastructure. She traveled to other cities, sharing lessons. But she always returned to the streets she knew. One evening she visited the old burned-out building, new windows, new facade. The family who lived there had long since moved, replaced. She placed a small stone bench in memory of city life's fragility, a quiet nod, not a plaque, no fanfare. She sat and looked at the street below, the cars, the meters, the flow of everyday lives. She remembered that first spark, the smoke, the moment the child cried for help, the adrenaline, the fear. She remembered pulling that hose, feeling incompetent and determined all at once. She remembered the hesitation, the surprise, the transformation, and she realized she was still that parking enforcement officer, in essence someone who watched over the margins, who enforced something small, who cared for the public domain. But she was also undeniably more, a steward of safety, a bridge between citizens and systems, someone who took risks when needed. Across the city, people who once cursed ticketing officers looked differently now. They saw individuals. They understood that behind meters and infractions lay order and care. They saw that heroes might come from unexpected places, wearing unsung uniforms. In her last public address before stepping down to return to a quieter life, the mayor said, "We declare today that Maya Reyes is not only a hero, but a symbol of what ordinary service, done fearlessly, can become. She reminds us all that greatness is not only in grand acts, but in small duties held with devotion." Maya nodded, tears in her eyes. She stepped down carefully from the podium and walked into the crowd where people swarmed around, offering hugs and thanks. She accepted them all, feeling the weight of gratitude. But she carried onward. That evening she walked home through silent streets. She paused under a street lamp, looked up at the stars. She drawn in a deep breath. She remembered the early mornings when she walked meter lines, the quiet of empty sidewalks, the certainty of her routine. She smiled faintly. She had been so small in the system then, but she had grown. When she arrived home, she removed her jacket, folded it carefully, and hung it. She stepped to the window, looked out at the city that had once been her entire world when measured in blocks and meters. Now it was broader, a system, a living organism she helped guide. She sat at her desk and she wrote in her journal, "I never wanted glory. I only wanted to respond. But perhaps this is how change begins, in small hands willing to reach outward in the dark." She closed the journal, drifted into sleep, and so ends this chapter of Maya's life, though the city's story continues. She remained always a servant of the public, a guardian of the threshold between order and chaos. For in every parking zone, every hydrant, every narrow alley, she had laid the groundwork for safety, and had shown how even the humblest roles might harbor the spark of heroism. Even the most ordinary jobs and humble positions can become the stage for extraordinary courage and selflessness. True heroism isn't about rank, title, or recognition. It's about stepping forward to do what's right when no one else will. Small acts of responsibility and care, done with integrity, can ripple out to save lives, inspire change, and transform how a whole community sees everyday public service.